Now, the next subcortical structure we're going to cover is the basal forebrain, which is made up of several structures that all contain cholinergic neurons, or neurons that use acetylcholine as their main neurotransmitter. However, as we'll see, these are not the only types of neuron present. The major subdivisions of the basal forebrain are the nucleus basalis and the septal nuclei. There are some other structures, like the diagonal band of Broca and the substantia innominata, but we won't discuss those. The basal forebrain is located just posterior to the lower part of the frontal cortex, and they project throughout the cortex, the hippocampus, and also the amygdala. And in general, the septal nuclei project to the hippocampus, and the nucleus basalis to the cortex. And parts of both structures also project to the amygdala. Now, earlier in the course, we talked about the massive projection between the septal nuclei and the hippocampus that's carried by that large axon bundle called the fornix. So, having a look at the neurons in the basal forebrain, there are a number of different types, and the types differ in their primary neurotransmitter. The unusual characteristic of this nucleus is the presence of 3 types of projection neuron, each using a different neurotransmitter. They all project outside the basal forebrain. The projection neurons containing acetylcholine are a distinctive feature of the basal forebrain, but there's also projection neurons containing glutamate and other projection neurons containing the neurotransmitter GABA. There are also 2 types of interneurons that only project locally, and one type contains glutamate, the other GABA. So one of these interneuron types is excitatory and the other is inhibitory. In the case of the septal nuclei, all the types of projection neurons target the hippocampus. In the case of the nucleus basalis, all the types target numerous different areas of the cortex. And the pattern of projection is very complex and not fully known. But in the case of the septal nuclei, cholinergic neurons in blue target both pyramidals and interneurons in the hippocampus. GABAergic projection neurons in red target hippocampal interneurons, and there's a projection from GABAergic neurons in the hippocampus back to GABAergic septal interneurons. There's also reciprocal glutamatergic connectivity, but the hippocampal targets of the green glutamatergic projection neurons in the septum haven't been identified, and the septal targets of the hippocampal pyramidals are also unknown. Despite the unknown aspects, it's clear that some very complex regulation is going on between the 2 structures. A clue to what's being regulated comes from observations of the electrical activity of the hippocampus. Sometimes you can see a slow theta frequency, and that theta frequency modulates a much faster gamma band frequency. And this general modulation of activity reflects a modulation at the individual neuron level, as illustrated for one pyramidal neuron. If the septal nucleus is damaged, this theta frequency disappears. In fact, destruction of either the cholinergic neurons or the GABAergic neurons blocks the theta modulation, so both populations are necessary. Hence, the complex structure and connectivity of the septal nuclei is responsible for imposing a theta modulation in appropriate circumstances. What's the effect of this theta modulation? Well, it's observed that long-term increases in synaptic strengths are more likely to occur if action potentials arrive at the synapse at the theta frequency. On a macro scale, the theta rhythm appears to be present during memory tasks. And if the septal nuclei are damaged, declarative memory deficits similar to those resulting from hippocampal damage are observed. These memory deficits also occur if the fornix linking the septal nuclei and the hippocampus is damaged. So in summary, the basal forebrain nuclei contain a complex combination of excitatory and inhibitory projection neurons. The nuclei target extensive regions of the cortex, the hippocampus, and the amygdala, and this targeting appears to play an important role in the imposition of a theta modulation on gamma band activity. And the theta band modulation appears to be connected with memory.